Well, it's nearly the day we've all been waiting for. Norwich City's Championship playoff campaign kicks off at 12 o'clock on Sunday when they welcome Leeds United to Carrow Road in what is, of course, a huge fixture in their season. Two-legged game, they're going to go to Ellen Road as significant underdogs given their away record, so they really need to get a positive result at Carrow Road in this one. Here on Tactics Board, I'm going to give you my predicted 11 for the game that I think David Wagner will choose, and I'm going to break down some of the key tactical issues going into it. So without further ado, here's the team I think Wagner will pick. So I've gone for Angus Gunn in goal, Jack Stacey at right back, Shane Duffy and Ben Gibson at centre back, with Sam McCallum at left back, Marcelino Nunez and Kenny McLean in the centre of midfield, with Christian Fastnacht on the right, Borja Sainz on the left, and Gabriel Sara just behind Josh Sargent up front. Now, I think there is a bit of a contentious issue to discuss in defence, and that is Shane Duffy. Obviously, he was arrested for drink driving in the middle of this week, and that is a consideration that we have to look at going into this game. But I think when we look at it tactically, it's quite difficult to discuss really how Wagner will see things playing out on a moral level, whether he'll sort of take that chance and go for the principle rather than the tactical choice, because I think if this hadn't happened, there would be absolutely no choice in David Wagner's mind. So on Tactics Board today, because we haven't heard from Wagner yet, I'm going to go for Duffy, because I think tactically, and if this hadn't happened, he would have gone for Duffy. Obviously, we'll hear sort of the club's stance on it and Wagner's stance on it at his press conference later today. But until we have that information, I don't think it's really fair to predict where both Wagner's state of mind is going to be and where the club are on the situation. Of course, they have issued sort of statements, and I think you can go and read the full article at pinken.com now to get what they officially said, but we haven't really had much of a steer on what it means for Duffy in the coming weeks, and for that reason I don't want to make too much of a prediction based on that. So I've got him at centre back for this one sort of cautiously, and then going forward I think it becomes a debate about the sort of Marcelino Nunez situation, Jonathan Rowe, Christian Fastnacht, Gabriel Sara, all the different elements that come into that. And I think part of this is why Wagner may be tempted towards simplicity, because we saw at Birmingham the effect that so many players playing out of position and playing in different positions to what they have been in recent weeks. We saw the impact that had. Not only do you have the likes of obviously Marcelino Nunez, who's in a new position, Gabriel Sara, who although he's played on the right a few times isn't necessarily used to that quite yet, but you also have situations where Kenny McLean, who was notionally in his same position, had more pressure on him to sort of try and start attacks, and you saw long balls from him going out. And I think when you shuffle it around as much as Wagner did against Birmingham, you can see the impacts on a larger scale. And I think he would have taken note during that game, and I think it was actually probably a good thing that experiment happened in a Birmingham game that didn't really end up having too much of an impact in the end, because I think everyone there will have seen that Marcelino Nunez isn't fit for the number 10 position right now and isn't the replacement that Norwich need for Ashley Barnes. And of course, Ashley Barnes missing is a huge blow for them, but I think when he hasn't been in the team this season, they've looked best with Gabriel Sara in that number 10 position. So I would go for Sara in there. I think Wagner will have learned his lesson from Birmingham and gone for that as well. And in that case, you'd expect to see Marcelino Nunez dropped in alongside Kenny McLean in midfield, and you pick him ahead of Jakob Sorensen every time. Then we come on to this debate about Jonathan Rowe, I suppose, and whether he's sort of fit and ready to be involved. And although we will hear more from Wagner later today, obviously you'd suggest, based on just a few cameos, no starts yet, nothing more than sort of half an hour really, that he probably isn't going to be ready, especially given how considerately Wagner has sort of bedded his players in. And I know this was a little bit of a bone of contention about his team selection against Birmingham, but I just think going into this one, it's going to be quite hard to put all your faith in somebody who hasn't played 90 minutes for several months now. Also, I think Wagner will prioritise sort of defensive solidity, and he's sort of hinted at that at times in reference to the playoffs. And we know in terms of tactical reliability and who he trusts in a more defensive sense, it's definitely more likely to be Christian Fastnacht than Jonathan Rowe. So I wouldn't completely rule out Rowe starting, and of course this could all change if Wagner says, yep, he's absolutely ready to start, he could play 90 minutes, but I just don't quite see that happening. And although I think if it was a complete 50-50 between him and Fastnacht, and I know Fastnacht obviously missed Birmingham, but that was more precautionary, Wagner said post-match. But yeah, if it was 50-50, I would choose Rowe personally, and I think Wagner would as well. It's not quite there just yet. So I think for the semi-finals, maybe we'll have to see Rowe in a more introductory role as a substitute and trying to make an impact. Then hopefully he could impact the final if Norwich get there. But I know I'm going several steps ahead. But for the first leg, I'm just going to say that it's more likely to be Fastnacht, and I'm going to go for him at right wing. Now, if we talk about some of the areas that Norwich can potentially exploit in this game, I think set pieces are a big one, and I've actually written about this in a piece that's going out at lunchtime today. But Leeds over the season have been pretty poor from set pieces, and Norwich fans actually saw that twice at Carrow Road, when first Shane Duffy headed home the opener, then he headed another one actually that looked like it was going to be the second goal, but it was ruled out. And I watched that back today. I still can't really make head nor tail of it, but yeah, basically twice Norwich were able to exploit Leeds and their weakness from corners. Both of those came from corners, one from either side, and they were both pretty basic situations where it was just a cross, Shane Duffy wanders into the position and heads it in. And given how consistently that's been a problem for Leeds, it's got to be an area that Norwich are looking at and David Wagner is looking at, because that's been an area he's been trying to get the most out of for the whole of his time at the club, let alone against teams that have very few weaknesses, and one of them is set pieces. So I think that's something that Wagner and his players will be working on, and his coaches throughout the week, and will have been working on, and will probably have some significant plans for, because, as I said, against teams that have finished with 90 points this season, that have looked, to be honest, much better than Norwich across the 46 games, those are the sorts of differences that they will need to pay a lot of attention to. And you'd suggest that set pieces are an area where Norwich could have some joy. The goalkeeper is probably, to be honest, another area where they could have some joy. And although I think Illan Meslier is a decent goalkeeper, in these sorts of levels of game, you have to look for the small margins, and they potentially could be there for Norwich in terms of the goalkeeper. I know he came in for a lot of criticism when Leeds lost 4-0 to QPR. A couple of ones that probably shouldn't have gone in. That Shane Duffy header for the opener that I mentioned a minute ago also went pretty much straight through him. So I think, although I'm not just saying in almost Sunday League fashion Norwich should just be firing shots in from anywhere, it's definitely one way they probably want to pay a bit of attention to that and try and test him maybe more than they would most goalkeepers, because with the sorts of players that they have that can hit the ball as well as they can, I'm thinking Gabriel Sara chiefly, of course, those are the sort of situations where you probably want to test the goalkeeper and give yourselves the best opportunity possible. So I think Meslier is a very small weakness for Leeds, but in terms of strengths, obviously Norwich have to be very, very wary of the individual quality. This is something that I spoke to Jack Stacey about after the Birmingham game when we looked ahead to Leeds, and it was actually the first thing he highlighted about them, really. I think he probably would say that more than anyone, having come up against Crysencio Somerville, the Championship Player of the Season, in both of those games. And of course Somerville scored the winner when they came from 2-0 behind to beat Norwich 3-2 in their last visit to Carrow Road. So Jack Stacey is very aware of that. I think it's something all the other Norwich players will be well aware of. You look at the quality they've got in their ranks. Joel Pirro can't even get a start at the moment. They've got Glenn Kamara in there, Jorginho Ruta, Joe Rodon at the back has been very good, even though Leeds have struggled at times to keep it solid in sort of the second half of the season. So there is a lot that Norwich need to be wary of. There are a lot of individual players that Norwich probably need to hope have an off day, or that those combating them have an excellent day. And they have done it at times this season, so it's not impossible. Obviously, Norwich have a lot of individual quality themselves, but it will be a tricky one. I'm sure we're all hoping Norwich can book a date at Wembley, however, and we'll have every kit covered across the game. So go to pinkun.com/subscribe to find out how to access our full range of coverage. Thank you for joining me here on Tactics Board, and I will see you very soon, hopefully after a decent advantage going into the second leg.